March Madness is finally here for the year of 2024. Welcome to the FIWB Bracket special. Welcome to the first bracket special of this year's NCAA tournament cycle. As you know, I'm Nate, and I'm here with Ben from the FIWB Ball Network. And today we're going to be going over our overview for our picks of this year's bracket. We are recording this on Tuesday the 19th, about 30 minutes before the first play-in game starts, but nobody cares, so we're just going to be talking about the whole bracket and pretty much ignoring that. To start it off, we're going to be going over our picks for the Eastern region. Ben, would you like to kick us off with your major upsets in the first round?
Not a lot of upsets here.
Is your round of 64 in the East just 1 through 8 winning?
Yeah, it's literally the higher seed winning every time.
And then in your second round, you have Washington State over Iowa State. Was that the only upset there?
You know, there's different ways to define upsets, because there's a lot of times where the lower seed will actually be favored to win. But yeah, not a lot of upsets on this one. So in my Sweet 16, I have UConn, Auburn, and Illinois, Washington State.
So in the East region, I am pretty much the same as Ben in the sense that the higher seed wins every first round matchup, except I actually have Drake taking down Washington State. I think it's an unfortunate draw for Washington State to have to play Drake in the first round, because Drake is a pretty underrated team in my opinion. And then in the second round, the round of 32, I went completely as you'd expect it, and I just have the 1 through 4. It's UConn, Iowa State, Illinois, and Auburn. So we have UConn versus Auburn in common in our Sweet 16. And I assume we both have UConn winning that one pretty convincingly. Would you agree with that?
I'd agree, but I'm pretty high on Auburn. I think that they do play at a higher pace than UConn, so it'll be interesting to see if they'll be able to push the pace or not. I don't think it'll be a very challenging climb for UConn this year.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm relatively high on Auburn too. I think they just got really unfortunate in which region of the bracket they were placed. Having to play UConn in the Sweet 16 is really difficult when they could have definitely had it easier in any of the other regions.
Yeah, also my philosophy surrounding these picks is, for example, if I think Illinois is going to beat Auburn, then it's a pretty safe bet for me to just pick UConn, because just how the point spreads work in these type of brackets, it doubles every round. You know, if a team is just going to fizzle out the next round, or you predict them to fizzle out the next round, then it's kind of smarter just to go with the safe bet and just kind of play the numbers there. So that's kind of what my philosophy surrounding a lot of this.
Yeah, that's fair. Trying to win the bracket group. Our other matchup, I have Illinois and Iowa State, and I have Iowa State winning that one. Pretty basic region for me, where I end up with the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 1 and 2 in the Elite Eight. But I don't know, it's a really tough bracket with a lot of good talent at the top.
The Illinois pick is probably the only time I went against my philosophy on this, because I think BYU will give them a run for their money, and it'll be tough for them to beat either Washington State or Iowa State, at least the way I have it predicted. But I think that they do have a pretty good offense, so I think they do have good three-point shooting, so I'm just kind of banking on that they'll get hot.
I think Illinois and Iowa State, who we respectively have in the Elite Eight, are both really good teams that have the very unfortunate reality of playing UConn to get to the Final Four. And I'm going to spoil your pick here and let the people know that we both have UConn as our winner of the East region. Moving on to the South region, which I think is a little more ambiguous than the East. Ben, do you have any upsets in the first round or two?
I wouldn't really call James Madison beating Wisconsin as an upset. I believe James Madison is a super high, either paced or just a great offense. So I have them beating Wisconsin. But I would also say that I would have Marquette on upset alert against Western Kentucky, because they just have such a fucking high-powered offense that I don't know if Marquette will necessarily be ready. And even if they are, it's just kind of like with a lot of these high-volume three-point shooting teams and and high pace teams, it could just kind of go either way. I do have Marquette beating the 15 seed though.
Yeah, I also have Marquette in that one, but like you said, Western Kentucky plays at a frantic pace, and I think Iguodaro and Kolek missing significant time for Marquette. Those are two of their most key players. They might be a little under-conditioned for playing against a team that plays so fast, so I'd look for that one to be a close game, but I do have Marquette. I agree with your pick on James Madison. I also have them beating Wisconsin. Wisconsin kind of coasted into the tournament on starting the season really hot, and they've been honestly pretty bad the last month of the season, so I don't really have a ton of faith. I think James Madison's a pretty popular pick over Wisconsin, and it's easy to see why. I do have one other upset in the first round of the South region. I have Boise State beating Colorado in the play-in game and then beating Florida afterwards. I just think Florida's injury luck is really unfortunate, and they're going to be a little bit outgunned, missing such a focal point of their defense.
Yeah, and I think Florida already doesn't have, or at least they play at a higher pace, I believe, than a lot of other teams. I wasn't aware of that, but I'm still gonna stick with Florida on that. I'm not sure who's gonna make it out of that play-in game because I know Colorado was in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, that'll be one of the interesting play-in games. You would have to shoot me in the head before watching one with Virginia or either of the 16s. That one should be pretty interesting. Did you have any upsets in the round of 32?
Nah, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 like you did on the East. I don't see anybody challenging Houston. James Madison is cool, but Duke is probably just overall the better team and probably gonna be more consistent round to round. And yeah, I just got Kentucky and Marquette down there.
I really only have one upset there. I do have Boise State beating Marquette. Flip-flopped on that pick a lot. In fact, I changed it like 2 minutes ago. I don't know if Marquette injury-filled season is going to have them in the right condition to play in the tournament when you're, playing on such short turnaround. Every single team you're playing against is both the most motivated they've been all season and guaranteed to be a good team. So I think Marquette might struggle with that. So I have Houston versus Duke and then Kentucky versus Boise State.
Your kind of point on that had me change my pick because I had Marquette over Kentucky. Just because I don't think Kentucky's defense is going to hold up, but I'm not sure Boise State's offense, but Florida and Western Kentucky in the first two, pretty high pace of play. So if conditioning's a problem, the quick turnaround from the round of 64 to 32 made me less confident that they'll get out of the round of 32 just based on like statistics. I just went with Kentucky over Marquette there, and I got Kentucky and Houston in my two coming out of the South.
I have Duke and Kentucky as my Elite Eight out there. I think Houston is another team with some bad injury luck. They're still a good team. I still think they'll compete with Duke, but I think Duke being healthier overall here is going to be what puts them over Houston for me. Even though I don't think Duke is really that elite of a team, I think they've drawn a very easy path to the Elite Eight.
Houston's one of those teams that about the pace, they are even slower than St. Mary's. So anytime there's like a big clash between pace of play, it's not exactly sure what to do with that, but I kind of erred on the side of probably defense in this. I'm not sure how good Duke is defensively, but Houston I've watched a couple of Houston games. They've got some good shot makers and playmakers, so I think I'm pretty confident in them. I have them coming out of the South to the Final Four.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Like I was saying, they definitely still have everything they need to compete all the way. They're even definitely still a contender for the title. It's just every year a one seed goes out relatively early. Most years even two of them do. So I don't know. I like Duke over Houston under these specific circumstances. And then I have Kentucky staying hot and beating Duke. I think if Kentucky can shoot the three with the percentages that we know that they can, it's not going to matter what pace you play with or how bad their defense is. They're just going to outscore you. The South region is really a pretty easy path to the Final Four for these top teams. The only real competition is each other once they get to the Sweet 16 or even Elite 8. I'm not super confident in my pick from the South region, but I do have Kentucky winning it because I'm trusting them to stay hot from three and score the lights out like they have been all season.
Yeah, not a bad pick. I had originally had them until I realized they had like outside the top 100 defense. So once I kind of heard that, I was like, okay. I feel like defense is probably going to matter a lot more than shooting, unless you're able to blaze your way through.
Yeah, I definitely get that too. It's also the way my bracket fell. I just found myself thinking Kentucky was a better team than everyone they ended up against. I honestly think if Houston beat Duke, they'd probably beat Kentucky, but I have Duke beating Kentucky, and I think Kentucky has a better matchup against Duke, so the way everything fell, they just ended up in my Final Four. Moving on to the West region. Any upsets to talk about in this one?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, that's the way I've picked. Portland native Marcus Sahonis is. I would love to see Long Beach State beat Arizona, but it's obviously a long shot. But I would say maybe the Charleston, Alabama, just because Alabama is so bad defensively and like high pace that it can kind of go either way. But I'd definitely look either Alabama losing or Arizona losing as probably the upsets that I would either bet on or like pick to happen. What about you, Nate?
So I have two kind of big upsets in the first round. I have New Mexico over Clemson, and actually I say big upsets, but I don't even think either one of these is that significant of an upset. New Mexico just has such a strange seeding because you look at their net ranking, they are 22nd in the net, they are 23rd on KenPom, and they're an 11 seed. It just doesn't make any sense. They're higher in both of those analytics than Clemson is. I honestly don't even really consider this an upset, but I have New Mexico winning that one relatively easily. New Mexico was really underrated by the committee this season. They probably should have been like a 5 or a 6 seed, honestly. And then I have Nevada over Dayton. I'm just not really sold on Dayton. They didn't win their conference. They're a 7 seed for some reason. I think they honestly should have been closer to a 10 if they even made it into the tournament, which a lot of experts had them missing the tournament entirely. So I've got Nevada over them. I just think they've played a tougher schedule. They're going to be more battle-tested than Dayton is.
But one of the metrics I would look for, like a sort of Sweet 16 double-digit seed, would be something like Nevada, where versus the top 25, they're 3-1. For me, as somebody who has watched Oregon State basketball, their leading scorer being Jared Lucas just kind of threw me off because I don't know if I just trust him in general. I mean, he's a solid player, but it just kind of threw me off. So I went with Dayton, but I think we both have them losing to Arizona in the next round.
Yeah, that's right. I have kind of two upsets in the round of 32. I have New Mexico over Baylor, which I would call an upset, even though I think those teams are relatively evenly matched. Baylor's a little bit better, but they might look at the lower seed next to New Mexico and kind of not realize that they're that same category of team in that same tier. I've got New Mexico and Arizona. And then up top, I have North Carolina beating Mississippi State pretty easily. I don't think North Carolina is going to be in any trouble there. And then I have St. Mary's over Alabama. You were talking about the difference in pace earlier. I think that game would be really strange to watch because Alabama plays really fast. St. Mary's plays almost the slowest in the country. And I honestly don't think Alabama's going to be very prepared for it because they haven't played anyone who plays as slow as St. Mary's does. And St. Mary's has played teams that play really fast like Alabama does. So I think it'll be a close one, and I'm not completely confident in it either, but I do have St. Mary's over Alabama making it to the Sweet 16.
Not a bad pick. I was sort of 50-50 on that, and still I would say it's probably closer to a coin toss than anything you'd bet money on. I guess I have Michigan State over Mississippi State, and for a while I had Michigan State over North Carolina, but I kind of just saw that they were going to face St. Mary's or Alabama. I think North Carolina probably would beat either one of those teams. So I was about 50-50 on North Carolina versus Michigan State. I kind of just went again with the analytics where North Carolina is probably going to have a higher chance of just winning the tournament or winning up to the Elite Eight and Final Four. So I just decided to go with them. I have them losing to Arizona, which looks like you have the same exact thing. Is that correct?
Both ended up with North Carolina versus Arizona in the Elite Eight. And we both ended up with Arizona in the Final Four. Our final region, the Midwest. Ben, do you have any upsets to report?
I do have, I guess, I'm not sure the odds, but I have Oregon beating South Carolina just because Oregon I generally like teams that come off of the winning the conference championship as kind of a good note to end on, and I have them beating South Carolina. I also would say Gonzaga versus McNeese is probably the biggest upset watch. I chose Gonzaga just because of their kind of history, just based on the likelihood that they probably get to the Sweet 16, because I don't really see McNeese getting out of the round of 32, but I definitely think that there's a high likelihood that they would win. And I'd probably say it's not a 50-50. I'd say I would predict McNeese to win that.
That's definitely the trendiest sort of upset pick that I've seen since the bracket came out. I'm not as sold on McNeese as a lot of people are. They haven't really played anyone at all. I do think they have a chance in that game for sure, don't get me wrong, but I have Gonzaga winning it too. I think depending on Kansas's injury recovery times, because they have two of their biggest, most impactful players, Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson, are both injured right now. And I think they're both on track to play in that game, but if they don't, I would look at Samford to beat Kansas, because I don't think they'd have enough scoring to keep up with any team in the bracket without their two offensive focal point. But as far as upsets go in the round of 64 for me in the Midwest, it's really only TCU over Utah State, which is the 8-9. They're pretty evenly matched. I wouldn't even call it an upset.
It looks like you have Gonzaga going further. I guess that's probably just based on Kansas, right, with their injuries.
Kansas and Gonzaga are relatively similar teams in terms of talent. I think Kansas is a little bit better in that regard, but also they've had injuries to players that have been in their rotation all season. Depending on how those affect their players, I could see it ending poorly for them there. That's another matchup where I really think it could go either way, and I just kind of went with my gut initially.
Who do you have in the final two from the Midwest?
The Elite Eight, I have Gonzaga and Tennessee. I have Gonzaga because I have TCU beating Purdue. I'm going to piss some people off with this, but every year when Purdue gets to the tournament, they get hit with the unbiased refs, and they don't get 40 free throws a game, and they lose early to a team that is, about the same talent level, but they're actually fairly officiated.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with Purdue basketball, other than the fact that they've fizzled out in like every tournament I've ever predicted them to go far in, so they may end up fucking me on that one because I have them facing Tennessee. Sort of because of that, I have Tennessee winning because I just have bad memories of Purdue, and I don't know how having your 25 point a game scorer being like the big ass center, like I don't know if Edey is really gonna, I don't know if game to game that's gonna build momentum. Like I think shooters and 3-and-D guys probably build momentum round to round. I don't see them getting out of the Midwest.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I looked about a week ago, and Edey was shooting like 12 free throws a game. And refs in the tournament just don't make calls like that. They don't want to turn the most viewed product into a free throw competition, so they let a lot more incidental contact go without giving a foul call, and that's a lot of Purdue's offense. They lost a game to Wisconsin the other day where they shot like 26 more free throws than Wisconsin did.
Seems like they're your fraud watch pick for this tournament.
Purdue is definitely my fraud watch pick. I have TCU taking them down in a close game. I don't think they're going to get blown out. But my Sweet 16 is TCU versus Gonzaga, and then Creighton and Tennessee. We have a different Elite Eight this time. You have Purdue and Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I have Purdue and Tennessee.
And then I have Gonzaga and Tennessee. Even with our differences in this region, we end up with the same Final Four pick. We both have Tennessee going to the Final Four. Moving on to our Final Four picks. We both ended up with UConn versus Arizona. Who do you have in that game, Ben?
UConn, Arizona. I have UConn winning that one.
Yeah, I have UConn winning it as well. Although I went back and forth on it, even though I think UConn is pretty easily the best team this year. The Final Four is in Glendale. It's essentially a home game for Arizona. So I think that could definitely play a factor, and it made me think about picking Arizona quite a lot. But overall, I just went with who I think is the better team, which is UConn.
Yeah, I'd agree. I believe UConn's net rating is like head and shoulders above like anybody else in the tournament, which is why I believe on like the ESPN tournament challenge, like 25% of people pick them to win. And I believe probably the betting odds have them as the number one to win. So that's for me that I like to weigh the betting odd into a lot of these because, you know, people put money where their mouth is and like they wouldn't bet on a team for no reason. Yeah, I got them going to the championship.
One stat to consider is that Arizona is 15-1 at home this season, so it would be really tough to beat them on technically a neutral court, but, you know, it's a home game for them. But we do both have UConn in the final. And then on the other side, you have Houston and Tennessee, and I have Kentucky and Tennessee. Who do you have in your pick of Houston versus Tennessee?
I have the very original championship of the 1 seed versus the 1 seed, the 1 seed UConn versus the 1 seed Houston. A big thing, like, for me is the versus the top 10, and they're Houston's 6-2, and I believe UConn is 7-2. I think that kind of gives you sort of a gauge on like how they're going to do versus these more talented teams towards the end of the tournament. So I have them going to the finals. What about you, Nate?
So we both have Tennessee making it and then losing, but I have them losing to Kentucky. And I don't think Kentucky is this really, really elite team, but I just ended up with them having a really easy path to the Final Four. And I think a team that plays the style they do, if they make it to the Final Four coming off of 4 straight wins, they're going to be hot as hell from 3, which is really where most of their offense comes from. So I think they'll be able to outscore Tennessee. These two teams in my bracket would be very familiar with each other. I think they played 3 times this season. I just would give the edge to the team I think would be playing better ball at that exact moment, which I think would be Kentucky. And then in the final, you have UConn and Houston. I have UConn versus Kentucky. I don't think it's any secret at all how much we both think UConn is going to win this whole thing.
Yeah.
We both have them winning it pretty easily.
Yeah, I can just talk about like your matchup with UConn and Kentucky. That is probably a very easy pick to go UConn. For me, it's a little bit tougher with UConn and Houston. I think it's going to be a very close game. Should be a very exciting game if that does in fact happen. They're both kind of a little bit slower than average pace-wise. So I think that a slower paced game does favor the defense, which I believe Houston does have a little bit better defense than UConn. So it's really close for me, but I went UConn just based on that they won last year. They have sort of an easier road there, and they have a higher betting odds. It's kind of pretty safe pick to go UConn here.
Yeah, I'd agree that Houston's definitely a decent style matchup and talent matchup for UConn. I think that would be a close game. Throughout my whole bracket, Kentucky has just been drawing good matchups for them that I think they would win just based on the play style differences and the talent level. They have hit a brick wall here with UConn. It's like UConn was a team crafted by a computer to beat Kentucky. I think UConn probably wins this game by 25 if it actually happens. This is maybe the most confident I've been in a pick outside of the round of 32 in this bracket. I have UConn easily beating Kentucky in the final.
Yeah, if you bet on UConn, halftime of UConn versus Kentucky, you can cash your bet. Like there won't be a line for to receive your money from the betting office, because that should be a runaway game if that does happen. So
you could put in a bet at halftime of UConn beating Kentucky, and I think the inflation in the 20 minutes it would take for the game to end would be worth more than the money you'd get back afterwards.
Probably have to put up a couple M's to get like a Big Mac.
If that. Yeah, you'd have to bet more than the sports books would allow you to even get $3 back.
You'd physically have to buy the sports books to have anywhere near the money to get a return.
So those are our brackets. We both have UConn winning. Really, this year went with a lot of the basic picks.
I based a lot of my picks on what's gonna get you points, because my family does a group like this for money, so I usually just try to craft the statistically best thing. I'm usually like top 3, usually top 2.
Stay tuned for around this time next week when we will be breaking down the matchups that actually happened in the first 2 rounds and what our takeaways are from that and how those results will change our predictions for the future of the bracket.
Probably change our predictions and make new ones based on who's actually there.
Thank you guys for watching. This has been the first edition of FIWB Bracket.